Hello, hello. So we come to an exciting session today. It's quite a meaty one. I believe it's going to really help you. And we're going to talk about the whole area of personality. And I believe this is really important to understand because we are not all the same. And that means we think differently. And a lot of conflict, a lot of misunderstanding comes to the fact that we're just different personalities with kind kind of different drivers. For a start, I'm going to recommend a book. I love this book, Surrounded by Idiots, Thomas Erickson, and it gives some good explanations of the same kind of thing I'm going to talk to you about. I'm going to give it a Christian context, though, and relate it to some important uh, concepts from the Bible. So I hope you find that helpful. So I'm going to first talk about we're not going to dive into personality in some way. You can dive into this from a psychological point of view, pretty deeply actually, and you can do the disc method and all this kind of thing, which is quite helpful. But I'm just going to keep it quite broad brush and top level because actually that's probably all you need to know, really, actually. And there are four personality types that the ancient Greeks came up with, and I believe this is true. I believe this is verified. I think it's much more complex than this, but from a broad brush point of view, this is helpful to understand. There's four personalities. There's choleric, there's sanguine, melancholic, and phlegmatic. Okay, four personalities, and I'm going to explain them. And I want you to be thinking as you're listening to this, well, where do you fit in? And just to explain, most people are a combination of personalities. So think of this like a pick and mix, a bit of choleric here, a bit of sanguine, a bit of melancholic. We have different amounts, and most of us are a combination of two of these personality types, and some are rarer than others, as I'll explain. Now, just to say, before we start, I believe that Jesus was all four personality types in equal measure. Um, and so that's what I believe I see from scripture. But you may differ from me on that opinion. But anyway, what I'm going to relate it to, which is really helpful, I believe, is the four gospel writers. Because what's so interesting is if you, as I'm going to explain, you will see that they all look at Jesus through a different lens. They look through Jesus through the lens of their personality type. And I'm going to show you in this short teaching a little bit how that works out. So let's start. We're going to start with the choleric personality type. You can think of this as the Reds, okay? The red. In the book, Surrounded by Idiots, he thinks of them as red, and I think that's a pretty appropriate color for the clerics because the clerics they're a rare type actually. They're quite rare. They tend to be leaders. They tend to be very goal driven. They're achievers. They're movers and shakers. They tend to be a little bit unemotional. They tend to be a little bit uncaring of people. They're disruptors. They're planners. They're dynamic. They're aggressive sometimes, and and in biblical terms, they're often have an apostolic role, actually, because they're builders. They like to get things done. They like timescales, achieve things. They're useful people to have around, but they can be quite irritating, of course, because they're quite focused. Now, the Gospel of Mark is written by a choleric. Now, it's probably because Mark probably was the writer, but Peter was the author because it's probably the account of Peter the apostle. In fact, I believe it is from that the fact that it was a choleric personality. And Peter was a choleric personality, wasn't he? The first to stand up, the first to try things, the first to. He was a mixture, actually, as I explained, but he was he was a get it done kind of guy. He was the first to to do things. And Mark's gospel is so interesting because cholerics don't like fluff. They like to get things done. They don't like loads of detail. They just want to get the job done. And Mark's gospel is the shortest. Okay, it's the shortest, the briefest, and also there's a word that's used in Mark's gospel, which is a phrase that's used that's interesting, which is straight away. So clerics like to do things straight away, like to get things done. So that's the first one, the choleric type. Okay. Now, the polar opposite of the cholerics are the phlegmatics. Now, these are the most common personality types. Okay. They're quite laid back. They're quite relaxed. They're caring. They're a bit unmotivated sometimes. They love long stories. They love storytelling. And there is one gospel writer who fits this bill completely. Don't know if you know who it is. Type it in the chat. It's the Gospel of Luke. I love the Gospel of Luke, actually. It's an amazing gospel. Luke is the storyteller. Luke is the doctor. He's actually a doctor. He's a caring type. You see all the wonderful, compassionate stories. The Good Samaritan, for example, is a compassionate story, not found in any of the other Gospels. There's a sense of grace about Luke's Gospel, isn't there? That is more. You can see the different lens he's looking at Jesus. There's lots of miracles, lots of stories of healing in Luke's gospel as well, and that all fits Luke's personality. What interests him, what grabbed him, what lens he saw Jesus through. And maybe you're a phlegmatic. Maybe that's your personality type, your major personality type. You're a carer. And they're brilliant. This personality type really works really well in the caring professions, actually. They're really needed. So that's that. If we move over now, I'm going round like clockwise here. Now, just to say as well, phlegmatics and cholerics really clash because, phlegmatics really laid back. Cleric wants to get things done. So there's a bit of a clash often happens there. I believe actually in the Bible there's another one actually. Paul the Apostle was a choleric personality. Barnabas was a phlegmatic. He was loving, he was kind, he was accepting, and they clashed, didn't they? There was no clash over Mark, actually, fun enough, interesting enough. It actually was over Mark. Anyway, that's a bit of an aside, just a thought that occurred to me as I'm doing this teaching, bears a bit of investigation. Now you've got now we move around and we move to the melancholic type. Now the melancholic type, phlegmatic, we'll think of them as green. The melancholic, we'll think of them as blue. Okay, and they do tend to be blue tendency. They do tend to be more easily depressed. They tend to be detail-driven people. They like, the accountant. They love detail. They can be a bit irritating because they love detail. They want to get the date right and exactly like precision. Engineers can be often cholerics. I mean, not cholerics. Melancholics. They're planners to the nth degree. Perfectionism, like we were talking about in the last couple of sessions. They are the experts at. They're organized, okay? And just to say as well, in terms of extrovert, introvert as well, the cholerics are, the reds, they're quite extrovert. They're quite, in your face, out there. The phlegmatics, they're quite introvert. They're more introvert. They're a bit more laid back. They're a bit more, they're not so forward as the cholerics. Then you've got the melancholics who are definitely an introvert. They're not extrovert. They don't enjoy being out there. They're unemotional as well, so they kind of relate to the cholerics a little bit there. And who do you think the gospel writer is that fits that bill? Type it in the chat. It's Matthew. Who would begin a gospel with a long genealogy, a long, accurate genealogy? I mean, Luke has a genealogy as well, but Matthew begins his gospel with the genealogy. It's important to get things right, important to establish accuracy. And that's the lens he's looking at Jesus, because he's looking at the lens for quite a Jewish lens as well. And he's looking at Jesus, Jesus the King. So you've got Mark, who's looking at Jesus, the Son of Man. Luke is the, sorry, might got that mixed up actually. Look, forget that for a minute. So concentrate on this. So yeah, melancholics, and so they can be quite creative as well. So often, creatives can be melancholics, have a melancholic tinge to them. They like to work on their own. They tend to be loners. Elijah probably wasn't melancholic, actually. He got depressed easily, didn't he? It really drained him when he was he was fighting the priests of Baal and that kind of, that really took out of him. And melancholics, often that's what happens to them. They easily get depressed. So and look at the job that Matthew was doing, a tax gatherer. I mean, counting the money. I mean, accountants are often melancholics. Well, I don't know, but they're kind of they would fit that kind of job, wouldn't they? Where they attention to detail, proofreading, probably melancholic job as well. You think of other things, and if you're a melancholic, you're probably going to identify this. You're probably going to tell us exactly how melancholics think. They think detail, don't they, rather than the broad brush. So now we come to the fourth type, which are the yellows, which are the sanguine. Now, sanguines they like to talk. They like words. They're often inspirational. They're often leaders. Peter was a bit of a sanguine as well. They're often emotional. They are often spontaneous as well. They like to try new things. They're quite creative. And who fits the bill? Which gospel fits the bill for that? We've only got one left anyway, so that makes it easy, doesn't it? It's the Gospel of John. Pardon me. So John, his gospel is different from all the other gospels, isn't it? Quite markedly so. So he's looking at Jesus from a completely different lens, very theological. In the beginning was the Word. What a way to begin! What a creative way to begin! Jesus. He looks at Jesus in a completely different way, and obviously, he wrote the Revelation as well, which is very artistic, full of symbols, and John is full of signs as well. I don't know if you know that there's 7 signs in John's Gospel. So he's looking at Jesus through a completely different lens. You can tell he loves words, can't you, as well? He's very poetic, isn't he, as well, John? Very more so than the other gospel writers. Very inspirational. And sanguines can be a real asset because they make good leaders. As I say, I think Peter was probably mostly sanguine, actually, and a bit of choleric. And John, who he was related to, probably was a sanguine. Also with a mix of something else as well. So can you see how all these different personality types are really important to see how they interact? And sanguines can be really irritating as well, actually, because they can be a bit too broad brush. They like the big picture often. They like to do things spontaneously. So sanguines and melancholics can really clash because the melancholics want detail. And the sanguine said, let's just so just see there's different pluses and minuses with all these different personalities. And just to say, what personality do you think I am? You can write in the chat. So I believe, and I've done some tests, so I kind of know. I'm a mixture of three. So I'm a mixture of sanguine. I'm probably mainly sanguine. You can probably tell from my personality, just the way I am. Uh, with quite a bit of choleric in there as well. So I like goals and that kind of thing. I'm a mixture of those two, possibly with a bit of melancholic in there as well. But I think over time I become less melancholic and actually more sanguine. So I believe over time your personality can be tempered, it can change. And as I said at the beginning, Jesus, I believe, was is all four in equal temperament. And interestingly, my wife is she's the opposite of me, which is quite helpful. So, sanguines are quite extrovert. Actually, they're like the cholerics. They tend to be quite extrovert. Um, Phlegmatics and melancholics probably introvert. Maybe that might be not totally true, but in general, that's true. So my wife, she's the opposite to me in lots of ways, because she's very phlegmatic. I'm not. I haven't. I haven't got an inch of phlegmatic in me. Okay, no, it's probably not true, but she's got loads of flex. She's very laid back. She's very, very the opposite of that part of the cleric part of me, which is really helpful actually. But also she's very sanguine as well, actually, I believe. So she likes to, she's very extrovert more so than me. Um, but at the end of the day, do you see how if we understand our own personality, what drives us, um, and if we understand other personalities, especially if we're leading something as well, we'll identify the melancholics who tend to not say so much. Um, you identify the phlegmatics who say too much often. They can kind of tell you every story, everything. And the sanguines are the same. They can go on a bit too much, and then they get the melancholic, not the melancholics, the clerics who get really irritated because they just want to get, they want to get to the point, and so they don't like long, pointless conversations. So just I hope that really helps you understand, and maybe well, let's think about how that maybe even influences the way we express our art and our creativity. I'm sure there's a difference. Anyway, hopefully I hope hope you've understood and you've enjoyed what I've taught today and attempted to cover. So thanks very much for watching.